Hello, my name is Luke O'Brien, and in this lesson that we'll be looking at volcanoes and more specifically looking at their formation and their structure. This lesson was taken as from the scheme of work that also has been provided, and it's an hour-long class, and it'll be taught to first years. Um, Before this lesson, first years would have already covered about the structure of the earth, plate tectonics, plate boundaries. They would have known or learned about deconstructive and constructive plates. So that's a bit of a background before this lesson. I always start off the class by explaining the learning intentions. So for this class, it was again to look at the formation of a volcano and the structure of a volcano. I find that explaining the learning intentions and what the students are going to be learning at the start of class is a great way to sort of start the class off right and to keep it very organized and very structured, because I feel like as first years they don't have a lot of initiative, so they sort of need to be told what they're going to be doing at the start of the class so they know and can prepare themselves for the class, and then hopefully by the end of the class they'll leave knowing the formation and the structure of a volcano. So then I always go into retrieval practice. So they'll have a list of questions depending on what the topic is. It'll be anywhere to sort of 4 to 6 questions. They would have done these questions for homework as part of the last class, and then coming into the day, they'll redo them, but this time they'll do them without their books, without their notes, without their Chromebooks, so on and so forth. And they sort of just try to do it from their own memory and see what they can do. Um, I find that it's a great way to help retain information for the students, and that they're actually learning the information more, and they're not just forgetting about it as soon as they leave the classroom. So there's a list of 4 questions there. They would have all been covered in the previous class, again about plate tectonics, the structure of the earth, convection currents, so on and so forth. Usually takes about 5 minutes at the start of the class. I don't really like it going any longer than that, just because obviously there's a lot of new information that we have to go through. Um, but yeah, I find it's a great way to get the class started, and they all know by now to come into class, take out their copies, and they're going to be starting these questions basically at the start of the class. So yeah, I find it very useful and very helpful to the structure of the class. Then they'll see the next slide like this. So since we're just starting off on the topic of volcanoes, um, they'll first get a couple of minutes to discuss to themselves this sort of leading question. So it states, can anybody tell me anything they know about a volcano already? So in sort of pairs or groups of 2 and 3, they'll talk with the people beside them on what they know. And usually students will come up with answers like, oh, they erupt, or there's lava, or they're big and dangerous, and so on and so forth. And it sort of helps give the class as a whole a better idea of sort of what a volcano is, gets them talking, gets them interested. And I think it's a good starting activity just to get people engaged and to sort of know what we're doing. I also then have 2 YouTube videos that I show them. The first one there is only about 30 seconds long, and it shows sort of the devastation of volcanoes. It shows it move, like the lava moving a car and the lava building up over time. And then the second one is actually a really interesting video. It shows them a volcano actually erupting that they were able to catch it with a drone. So they're quite good videos. Again, they won't really know the detail that's going on within the videos, but it gives them that starting knowledge that they can visualize it themselves. And then when we go over the information, that they know what they're talking about, they'll have actually seen it before. I find this is a great way as well to help more the visual learners in the class, because again, some people can just read notes and that's fine and they'll understand it, but sometimes actually seeing what we're talking about really helps them. We'll then move on to the formation of the volcano. So again, this will only take a couple of minutes. I'll say in pairs, try understand what's going on in this diagram or this picture, and hopefully from the previous class they should know that that's a plate boundary, and the heavier plates going into the mantle and creating pressure and so on and so forth. And they should hopefully be able to figure out a few things, and by going through each group or a couple of groups, we're able to start a class discussion into how the formation is actually occurring. So After that, we'll have a bit of a class discussion, and then I'll use these next few slides to sort of help back me up. It's just talking about what's happening in the picture, that there's a gap in the Earth's crust, whether they separate or collide, and so on and so forth. And I feel like having that class discussion and then using factual slides and images to help back it up really helps them understand the topic more. So we'll just go through each slide. Again, this is just another level of it, that is, it happens again, and when lava comes out of the volcano, it hardens, and what do we think happens when this hardens, and so on and so forth, until we get to the last one, and we sort of talk about this cone structure they have. Throughout this time of these slides, I will try and ask questions, sort of leading questions that they might not know the answer to yet, but one or two might get it, and it helps keep them engaged and involved in the lesson. I'll then show them all the three pictures at once, and then I'll sort of ask a few cold calling questions, saying, one of the might examples might be, can we see any differences or stages of progression through these three pictures? And they should hopefully see that as the volcano erupts, it gets larger through that lava hardening, and so on and so forth. I find it's a great way to sort of just check that they're understanding what we're going through, and that, again, this class discussion helps reinforce that knowledge of how a volcano forms. I will then use mini whiteboards for the first time in the class, and the students love mini whiteboards. They find it great. They're always really engaged when we're doing this. So again, I'll go back and I'll pick a couple questions regarding to volcanoes, like maybe a question on the shape of a volcano, or maybe what plates they occur at, or how it starts, or just some general questions about the formation of the volcano. And I would have had these prepared at the start of the class anyway. So it's sort of quick, it's concise, it's 3 or 4 questions, an answer or two on the board. I get students to put the board down on the table when they're done, and then I'll say, okay, 3, 2, 1, everyone hold it above their heads, and it gives me time, a couple of seconds, to scan across the room to make sure everyone's on the same page. The students love it. I find it a very effective way to check that everyone knows what's going on. If there's a lot of wrong answers, we'll go back, and if the majority of the class is right, we'll move on forward. So yeah, students seem to love it, so it gets used a lot. Then we'll go into the volcano structure. Again, we'll sort of go through each one by one. I feel like putting the sort of each section by section up, like so, sort of helps them go through each one singly, rather than having all the information at the one time on the board. Again, this is a lot of me sort of talking, going through what's happening. I will ask some questions while we're going through it, cold call, ask some leading questions, and so on and so forth. But overall, this is a lot of me talking. After we go through the first 3 parts of the volcano, I will then get their mini whiteboards out again, and I'll ask them 3 questions on the volcano. So the first one might be the area underneath the volcano that contains molten material, and then hopefully they'll all write the magma chamber, and so on and so forth, and we'll go on from there. I'll ask them a question on the central vent, and then the crater as well. We'll then go to the rest of the structure of the volcano. Again, same thing, going through the lava, the cone. They should already know the lava and cone from looking at it in the previous slide, or have an idea, so usually this section is a little bit quicker. Again, at this stage, I have a white screen up. I use it to ask a few cold questions, so we can then move on, give me a bit of time to reset. I then use a Mentimeter to help round out my class. I'll get them to use their Chromebooks, add in the code, and then it'll make this lovely word cloud on the electric whiteboard, and they love it. They're able to use their Chromebooks. It's different activity to writing, and they all seem, and then as the teacher, you're able to see what are they commonly putting up, what are they missing, and we can have an under class discussion. Then if there's time, I like to do this sort of written activity. It's a question on what we covered in class. It gets them writing. If we don't have time to do it, again, it might be part of the homework, but if we do have time in the class, it will be used. So again, it's helping that differentiating of people being able to talk and also write in the class. So thank you for listening to my lesson.